Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all here to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, February 11th, 2025. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30, and may we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Mr. Fitzer?
Here.
Mr. Kucera?
Here.
Mr. Nushai? Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Solomon? Mr. Tinlin?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda number 4 is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes with the agenda? Okay, then I'll just approve it as it stands tonight. And we'll move on to number 5, which is approval of the regular meeting minutes from January 28th, 2025, our last meeting here.
I will make a motion to approve meeting minutes from January 28th, 2025.
Second.
Motion and second. Any changes? Everybody's happy with it? May I have roll call on that, please?
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
And Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion. If there's anyone from the public wishing to speak or opine on anything this evening, you're welcome to come to the microphone. Please just give us your name, your address, and try to hold it down to about 3 minutes or so. We're leading it, though.
I'm Judy Klein. I live at 825 Elms Ford, right on the corner, where I'm going to have a retaining wall, and I want to know what a retaining wall is.
We'll probably get that answered for you in tonight's
They will
conversation.
have that answer for me, or when they come up?
We'll bring it up. Yep.
Okay, that's the main thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheryl Dry, 779 Elmsford. I just have a really simple request, and that is that at some point tonight when we get to the Shalom topic, if we could find out what the process is. Next steps, next steps, next steps. We did that. You all did that nicely for us when it was possibly going to be a PUD. And I think a lot of us would appreciate the same for this process so that we understand all the next steps.
Well,
Thank you.
We'll try to do that. Thank you. Mr. McCauley.
Yes, 1008 West Selfridge, Clawson, Michigan. Are we going to be able to discuss items later on the agenda in open forum like this?
I can open up public discussion at a later point after we have discussion. If everybody's confused at that point, raise your hands and let me know that you have outstanding questions. And if there's enough, I'll open up public again.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Anyone else in public? Seeing none, I will then close public discussion. And we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is consideration of the site plan amendment application for 1238 Anderson Court.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You may have recognized this property from a couple of months back. So this is at the end of Anderson Court on the north side of the cul-de-sac. And it is existing operating business. And they were back in the fall for an accessory structure, basically it's a shelter for 2 of their company vehicles. And they would like to put a second such structure on the property right next to the first one, 22 by 30 feet, open at both ends, black metal siding, frame structure. So the first one has been installed. I don't know if anybody got a chance to go by there, but it's been installed and finalized out. This structure, just like the first one, will use all or parts of 3 parking spaces on the site, and it'll shelter a couple of company-owned vehicles. The loss of a parking space doesn't actually affect the site's compliance with parking requirements. They do have their required screen wall. They do not have a green belt or buffer. That is the existing condition of the site. The site's landscaping all lies in the front yard. It's non-conforming with the parking lot landscaping requirements, just as it was last time we discussed it. They're not proposing any changes to lighting or any other aspect of the site. And they are accessed only from Anderson Road. Couple things about the setbacks that we discussed last time when they were here for the other structure. The side setback in that district is 0, and they are putting this along the side lot line, about a foot off. And then it meets the maximum building height. It's 14 feet tall. And the other setbacks are compliant. For design standards, you do have some design specifications in the BRD2 district. Section 3.14 sets forth those standards. The most applicable standard is that all exterior building facades and accessory buildings shall be integrated, harmonious, and compatible with the finished material used on the front facade design features. Reflective glass or metal panels should not be the predominant exterior material. Use of paint, smooth concrete masonry units and stained concrete masonry units shall not be deemed as in compliance with this section. The standard's written primarily to address primary structures, but the PC can consider whether the appearance of the building meets the compatibility goals of the BRD2 district. Of course, it matches the one that's already there. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I believe the applicant is here as well.
I have no questions. Anybody else?
Joe, is it, with the picture that we have, it's the black one, not the white canopy style, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
No. Touch on that.
Okay.
So when we received the amendment application for this, because it was already approved by our building official, I just wanted to have them provide a picture of what the approved structure looks like. And when I saw the white one there, I was also kind of confused. So I asked them, what the history was behind it. They said when they acquired the building a few years ago, that was already there. And so it's been something existing. And that's kind of where they got their idea to put these ones there. And so they did share that white canopy tent will be removed once this one
It'll kind of
goes
go
up.
in its place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not right there, but close enough. Yeah.
And I do like that you went above and beyond and got us photos. It helps.
I think it helps with visually instead of just looking at the site plan, which is of course required. It doesn't really help tell the story of what it looks like.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay, thanks.
that. Yep.
So you think the appearance matches the compatibility of the neighborhood?
It does. It's nicely finished, I think.
Yeah, I think
So,
it's good.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Joe? Any questions for the applicant, if they're here?
Not really.
Are you going to build any more, or is this it?
At this time, this should be it.
Okay.
Is she- Okay.
Just trying to save you time, just in case. Right.
Okay,
Well,
then.
and I do think we have this goes beyond like are they allowed us any number of accessory dwellings? Is this considered an accessory dwelling, I guess, and
It wouldn't be an accessory dwelling, but it would be an accessory building.
building? Yeah,
Essentially, on non-residential sites, accessory buildings are required to meet the standards that a principal building would have to meet. So there's not necessarily a hard limit on the number of accessory buildings you could have on a non-residential site. But of course, you don't want to get like a hodgepodge effect where it's just like lots of little buildings scattered all over the place. So
Would probably put a stop to it when they run out of parking spaces.
yeah, right, yeah, or
Carport
when
instead.
it ceases to be compatible, there's a certain point where
Well, I
it
just had a
might-
question because I went out and did see the building, and they have a lot of space back there, so that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of space on the site.
Would the applicant like to,
If I may, we have looked.
can you come to the
possibly-
mic, please? People at home can't hear you.
Sean McDonough from Gen Oil. Thanks for your time, by the way. There is been some discussion in the back of the building about possibly putting another one back there, maybe a little bigger, that exactly matches what we're doing here. They do a great job protecting our equipment from the elements. We weren't there. We thought maybe going into next year, that might be something we would explore. If it made more sense now to get a pre-approval for that, we'd be happy to explore that, but it wasn't something we were exploring until probably next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
And if there's no more questions, I'd entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the site plan amendment application for 1238 Anderson Court.
Second.
Motion and support. No conditions added to it, so I'll just simply take roll call on this, please.
And that was motion by Ms. Redmond, seconded by Mr. Scott.
Correct.
Mr. Kucera,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8 is consideration of the preliminary site condominium application for the former Shawm School site, parcel ID 16-20-33-179-043.
Okay. Yes, so we are talking about the Shawm School site here. I think everybody's aware of where that is. Probably doesn't need any introduction. So it is 8.117 acres and zoned R2 single-family residential. I think as we're all aware, the surrounding zoning is also all single-family. It's a mix of R1 and R2. And Clawson Park, of course, is next door. They are proposing a condominium subdivision with 39 lots, each of which will have a detached single-family home with a detached garage. The subdivision plan includes the construction of 2 streets through the middle of the project labeled Shawm Drive and Kenwood Street on the plans. And there is a detention pond occupying the southeastern portion of the project. Now, I have in my letter, and it was asked about earlier, so I'll go through the process for a condominium subdivision. That's set forth in section 6.4 of the zoning ordinance. So the phase that we're at right now is the preliminary condominium subdivision plan. So a preliminary condo plan is submitted for planning commission review, and approval of a preliminary condo plan confers upon the developer the right to submit a final condominium plan within 1 year. Once this is approved, more detailed drawings are created for engineering review. That's where they go next. They go to engineering review and they work out all the kinks with the utilities. They make sure the road sections are correct, everything like that. They check the volume of the detention basin to make sure that it's going to hold the correct amount of water for the development that's occurring. Once they get through engineering review, they will come back to the Planning Commission for it's called Final Preliminary Condominium Subdivision Plan, is the term that's in the ordinance. I know the term final preliminary is a little odd, but that's what it's called. The Planning Commission at that point reviews the final condominium subdivision plan, and it makes a recommendation to City Council. It also is approving the final preliminary condominium subdivision plan at that point. So at that point, the submission is expanded to include the draft master deed and bylaws of the subdivision. And if that's approved, the applicant can proceed with development of the public improvements. So they can put in the utilities, they can put in the streets, and the detention and retention. They then go to City Council, and Council reviews and approves the final condominium plan, which is really, they're reviewing as-built drawings of the public improvements and its associated documents at that point. And then once that's approved, they can start pulling building permits for the individual lots. And then each home is reviewed at that time for compliance with the zoning ordinance and the construction code and any other applicable statutes and ordinances.
Excuse me, why does that go to council at that? It kind of sounds like council's doing the site plan work that we normally do.
It's a strange order of operations. That's what's in our ordinance. That's how it's set forth. It's not the only ordinance I've seen do it in that order, but that is how it's set out in our ordinance.
So we give it our blessing, and then council actually looks at more detailed site plans like we would normally do.
Council's really looking at the as-built of the public improvements.
Yeah, okay,
They're
so-
basically saying this was done correctly.
And it will not come back to us again after that?
It wouldn't come back to you after
That
that,
point,
no.
okay.
Yeah.
So, Joe, you mentioned a step, the master bylaws of the HOA. Who
Yeah.
approves that? The council or the planning commission?
That's
one
the
of your
planning
steps?
commission. The
Oh, so
planning
approve the
commission
master bylaws of the
is,
HOA?
yeah, it's part of the final preliminary condominium subdivision
So they'll be
approval.
together, right?
Yeah,
One
they would
same
be
step,
together.
The two topics.
Exactly, yep.
Not to get too picky, but we don't necessarily approve it. Like, we recommend it for approval, or do we actually approve it?
It is functionally approved when you grant your approval at that point, because then they're getting started on the common elements
Okay.
of the condominium.
And this is different than the one that we saw on Baker, correct? Because I don't remember,
No, this is the exact same process that
so,
was in that
because I
letter.
don't remember, maybe I'm recalling wrong, that you broke it down into, I didn't think that they came back after that.
No, they
initial-
definitely will be back.
They will,
Yeah,
okay.
yep.
Okay, thanks.
So, Joe, what we did at Baker, same way, we're looking at the parcel size of lots and if they're to our ordinances, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then the next steps will go, okay.
Yep. So really, I mean, for the most part, when you're approving a condominium subdivision, you are looking at the lots to make sure that they meet your ordinance. And that's basically it. Now, if it's a more involved condominium subdivision that had, let's say, a clubhouse or something, yeah, you'd be looking at the site plan for the clubhouse as well, in a lot of detail. But in this case, we don't have anything like that. We just have streets and lots.
And we don't have any setbacks or anything like that that we're going to be looking at and confirming or approving. That's all done by
Really, what you're
council.
confirming is that they've put the correct building envelope on the plans. So if you look at the plans, there's like a dotted
Right.
rectangle in each of the
Yeah.
lots, and that's where you can put the principal building. So we look at that to say, okay, yes, they've given us the correct dimensions of that buildable area for the principal building.
And Joe, just so we can clarify, because there's been a lot of discussion, when we say condominium, that's really more of a form of ownership, right, than style of home?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, they're going to look just like single-family homes look, but they will be owned as part of a condominium that is over the site.
And the reason why we're using HOAs is just because the plat laws are antiquated, so it takes a lot longer to use those laws versus HOA? Because I've
That's-
kind of read up on that, so most developments
Right.
now in Oakland County kind of follow this pattern, right?
Most developments statewide
Yep.
use the Condominium Act. It is by right under state law, and yes, the plat process is a more cumbersome and long-lasting process. So pretty much every developer chooses to use the Condominium Act. Essentially because the Condominium Act was set up by the state to be an alternative to the traditional platting process.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Joe, one more. What regulates the placement of the retention pond?
The Oakland County stormwater standards?
So that regulates where it goes on each individual site?
Well, the thing that regulates where it goes on the site is, generally speaking, the topography, because you want to put it at the lowest point of the site so that all the water naturally goes to it, rather than having to install mechanical pumps, which of course can break over time and then require additional maintenance.
Okay. And the size is regulated by the Oakland County?
That's right.
Per acre you have?
It has to be able to handle a certain volume of runoff, yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. Okay, so yes, 39 units, like I said. Again, all detached single-family homes. All of the 39 lots meet the 50-foot lot width that's required in our R1 and R2 districts, and they also all meet the 5,500 square foot minimum size requirement. They are showing the correct setbacks on all the lots. That's 25 feet in front, 5 feet minimum on one side of the lot with 10 on the other, a total of 15 feet for the two side setbacks, except at the street, which has to meet the front setback. That's 25 feet. And then the rear setback is 35 feet. We do have standards for detached single-family homes. Those are found in section 4.1 of our zoning ordinance, and those standards will have to be met by any home that goes in here. The standards of this section we know can be met on the lots that are proposed because they meet our minimum size and width. They've submitted the materials that are required for a preliminary condo approval under section 6.4. Development of public or non-residential property in residential zoning districts has a special set of regulations, and section 4.5 of our zoning ordinance, 4.5B would be the subsection that applies to this development, and the standards of that section are met. When we look at off-street parking, detached single-family homes have to provide 2 off-street parking spaces. Each one of these homes is proposed to have a 2-car garage detached and a driveway leading back to that detached garage, so they definitely meet that standard. Looking at landscaping, single-family developments generally exempt from the landscaping standards of section 515. They're going to need a street tree per lot. Those will be shown on the final condo approval plans in approximate locations. Ultimately, the final locations of those trees, they go in as the houses are built. So you're not going to put them all in before you build the houses because you'd just be running over them with dump trucks and things.
Why would they be exempt from the landscaping standards?
They're creating single-family lots, and we don't require the non-residential landscaping standards to apply to any single-family lot in the community. So they're not going to be subject to those requirements.
No mandatory planting of trees.
Exactly, yeah, other than that street tree,
There will be
yeah.
trees planted, I assume.
And there's no
Hopefully.
landscaping that adheres to the pond that's there?
I would like to see some, but we don't have a detention pond landscaping requirement. So you can ask them if they're planning on putting anything there, but we don't actually have any pond landscaping.
Or any common
requirements.
element type landscaping requirement?
The only common element is the pond.
Right,
So that's.
but we don't have an ordinance that
No,
talks about that?
Unfortunately, we don't really deal with a lot of condominium subdivisions or subdivisions in general these days. So I think our ordinance just doesn't.
Because there
really-
are certain grasses and plants that will help deter Canadian geese, at least from what I've read. That's a real concern to me, obviously, if we don't have an ordinance. But, with the football field and the park there, I just feel like it's going to be a lot of geese gathering. So,
The other thing I'll note about the pond is that ponds require fences if they're over a certain slope, but they don't require fences if they're not more than a certain slope. And I believe this is not at that fence threshold. So I don't believe there's going to be a fence there either. But we can ask them what they plan to do as far as treating the pond from a landscaping perspective, if anything. We've got 2 public streets here as required. They've got sidewalks going along both sides of every one of them. If they are going to do street lighting in here, there will be a street lighting plan required at final condo approval. DPW, police, and fire have all weighed in and they're all okay with the plan. And then we do have an engineering letter. I won't speak for the engineer, but we do have the letter. And then that's it for my review. If you have any other questions for me, I'm happy to address them. And then we do have the applicant here. You can speak to him as well.
Hey, Joe, just on the process again, so step 2, after we get past the parcel lot size approvals, the engineering review and planning, is that done with the city administration, or is that in discussion in public forum?
The city engineer is the one who does that.
So we won't see
review.
it until,
It would come back
Comes back
after
to
the
us,
city
right?
engineer
Okay.
is done with it.
Joe, in terms of the retaining wall, can you speak to that? Does that go all the way around the complex, or is that just at entryways?
I'll let them address where the retaining walls are. I can explain what a retaining wall is, though, because I know that was the basic question that we started with. So a retaining wall is any wall that holds back earth. So this wall next to me here, let's say there was a big garden bed within it that came right up to the top of this table here. This wall would be retaining the soil behind the wall, and then you've got a drop down to the next level of grade. That's what a retaining wall is.
So they're gonna be building up the grade a lot there, or, I mean, what requires a retaining wall on this site?
I'm going to have to defer to them on that, but they will, of course, be grading the site. And I don't know necessarily how much cut or fill is going to occur in any particular location. That is an element of engineering review. But I will let them speak to where the retaining walls are going to go and why they're needed.
Okay, but in our ordinance, where is retaining walls required? Like, where does it state? The only thing I could find about the like retaining walls on, in a residential is like an entryway structure, so I'm curious.
Well,
on-
they're not doing any kind of entryway structure, so they're probably trying to preserve something about some existing grade somewhere or something like that. Again, I've got to let them speak to that.
Well, I'm talking about our ordinance, I'm asking you about our
Well,
ordinance.
zoning doesn't deal with grading and retaining walls, generally speaking. That's all
So-
part of engineering standards.
But how do they regulate that?
I would have to defer to the engineer. It's not something that
So we
falls under
don't,
my
our
purview.
ordinance is quiet on retaining walls?
Our zoning ordinances, certainly, yes.
Okay.
Item number 11, it says streets. And the applicant proposes that both streets will be public as required in section so-and-so. These are the existing city streets or the new streets that they're putting?
These are the two new streets that are going through the development.
They're going through development. They will be considered public streets, but they are still maintained by the HOA, the public.
No,
Because the public-
if they're dedicated as public roads, they'll be maintained as public roads, just like
maintained
every
by-
other road in the city, yeah.
Okay,
They'll be constructed as part of the project, but they'd be dedicated as public roads.
okay, so they'll be maintained by the city then.
Yeah, they become city property.
Okay.
And do the easements change at all in this plan? It didn't look like it from the overhead. But the easements that are there right now around the site, will they remain? And will parking still be remaining on, what's that street there?
Oh, you're talking about the parking along the west side of the site? That's
Correct.
going away, no. That won't be-
So will
that won't
that
be there anymore.
easement just be filled with grass at that point in time, or is it going to
Yeah,
be?
it'd just be like a planting strip, just like you see between the sidewalk and the street.
Because on Bywood, the easement's a nice buffer, I don't know how many feet, probably 10 or 11 feet. That will be maintained, and,
Yeah, I mean, the existing rights of way of the streets surrounding the property aren't changing at all. So, where the sidewalk is generally speaking, not always, but generally a good guide toward where the public right of way ends. And anything outside of that is going to be within the right of way. So if you've got something between the sidewalk and the street, that gets planted with grass. Of course, there's going to be driveways across it, so not all of it will be planted, but
Okay.
the portion that's not driveway will be.
Further questions for Joe? questions for the applicant? Probably, right?
Yeah.
May the applicant please come to the microphone? I think you were asking where the retaining walls are going to be.
Good evening, Tim Loughran, Vice President of Land Acquisition for Robertson Brothers Homes. Tonight with me, Roger Scher is our partner sitting over there, and then Jack Flynn from Robertson. Ted Werner's here to represent the school district. We're happy to be here. We have a quick presentation. If you're so indulge us, Jack can go through that real quick. But before that, I just want to lay to rest there will be no retaining wall. That was an engineer being an engineer, and of course, going into final engineering. They are designing it. There will be no retaining wall. We can grade that lot. That was basically at the northwest corner of the site, so that's nothing to worry about. They're a little bit higher, so they just really took it as black and white. This is higher, this is lower. We have to put a retaining wall, and there's no need to do that. We have plenty of room to grade, so there's no issue with that. So if that's okay, if Jack could just present real quick and get you guys up to speed with the new plan.
Sure.
Good evening. As Tim said, I'm Jack Flynn with Robertson Brothers Homes. So, yes, we're going to be discussing a plan that you guys have seen before. This is going to be a by right community now. It's not going to be the PUD that we previously brought to the table. And we just want to say we're excited to move forward with this project. We think it's going to be incredible for the community, and just going to go over a couple highlights here that you probably already know about. So, we're aiming to have a nice walkable community, hence having the sidewalks on all the public streets. We believe this is an underserved market, and we're going to be bringing families to Clawson and improving the area. There's going to be tax revenue benefits, with this development. Previously, it was a school which generated no tax revenue, so we see that as a very good benefit for the city. And just reiterate, these are single-family homes. Going to be between 2,100 and 2,400 square feet, so which we believe is going to be an adequate size for families looking in the area. We can move on to the next slide. So here's our revised site plan. Again, this is by right with R2 zoning. It is a similar looking layout. However, now we have 39 single-family homes instead of 44. So you'll kind of notice that we've removed the alleyways as we had in the PUD. Again, all the setbacks are in accordance with the zoning, and they do have 50-foot wide lots, which satisfy the minimum requirements. We can go to the next slide. So here's kind of just some elevations that we have for our single-family homes. These are taken directly from Normandy Oaks, which is a project that was done in Royal Oak. I'm sure you're familiar with, just south of town. These elevations are going to be similar to what we're going to build, except we're going to make some changes and have them. We're going to just modernize them just a little bit, but generally very similar size and everything. I guess that's it. So thank you all for seeing this. Again, this is probably stuff that you've seen before, and we just want to say we appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we hope that you recommend approval or approve.
Thanks.
Thank you. One question I have, have you purchased this property yet, or are you still?
No, it's still owned by the school district. We close on property after we receive final approvals.
You want to make sure you get through all of this?
Correct.
First,
Yeah,
so you can do
that's
what you want to
standard for us. So we have it under contract with the school district. I think it's been about a year now that we've had it under contract. They've been a very good supporter for us and a great partner for us to do that. So we will purchase it when we get our basically our final condo docs approved from council.
Okay. They mentioned fencing around the retaining wall, and that is not required at your site because it's not that deep.
Because of the slopes, and I forget exactly what the slope is. I don't know if it's 401 or 301, but there is and it's on the plans. It's on sheet. Oh, I had it. Sheet SPO 2.6. It does show a 4-foot decorative aluminum wrought iron fence around around that. And that's a requirement by the county for a pond with that kind of slope.
It surprised me that we would have a pond without a fence around it. The one we have now is at 14 and Crooks. There's a retention pond back there. That's all fenced off.
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe we could put in a pond someplace of any kind of depth and not fence it for children and pets and things.
Right. Yes.
So,
You said that's a 4-foot fence?
Yes, that's the requirement.
do you have any idea what the depth of this is going to be when it's filled with water? I mean, can we fish in it?
So it won't be filled with water except for rain events. So it'll slowly meter out, but it's not meant to be a wet pond. So yes, certainly. And I wish I could tell you exactly. I've got to count all the. I think it's about 5 feet, if I'm not mistaken, but I could do some math for you.
Yeah, I think our concern is just kids in the neighborhood.
Safety reasons.
Yeah, getting into it.
Yeah, it's for safety, obviously.
I think typically it's more mushy than wet. These are ponds that hold their water all the time.
Your mic's not on, Joe, just so you know.
Well, it says it's on.
Oh, well, we can't hear you like it is, just FYI.
Yeah, it's more mushy ground than standing water, generally speaking. You'd have to get a lot of rain to have water stand in there for any particularly long period of time.
And just to add to that, there was a question about what it would look like in plantings. We are planting it with a native seed mix. So it's essentially going to be functioning, it won't look like a manicured lawn, if you will. It's meant to act more as a natural kind of landscape. So we're going to be seeding it, and that's on sheet L2. And it's kind of typical of what you see ponds out there, but it will kind of grow to be a little bit, it'll be attractive because it'll be kind of like naturalized, longer grass type of look. So that would be what you're going to see there.
So do you make any attempt to incorporate plantings that detract goose or geese rather than attract them? I mean, I was reading about like Kentucky bluegrass. That's something that they're more prone to come, feed on versus other types of material and plantings.
Just to be completely honest, not something that I typically get asked, but I don't think we've had problems in the past. I don't know, is there an issue with this area specifically?
No, every time I
Oh,
see a
okay.
retention or detention pond, I see geese everywhere, so.
Yeah, and the good news is it won't be wet most of the time, so there wouldn't be necessarily a reason for them to go there. Yes, there would essentially just be like I said, the native seeding and no other plants. We will look at opportunities potentially to maybe plant it later. The really issue that we have is that they have to have an area around the pond for access, and that really reduces the ability for us to put trees in that area. So there might be opportunities to do that, but as of right now, what you see is what we're proposing.
Does your other development in Royal Oak have a retention pond of a similar design?
So the Normandy Oaks site, actually the detention pond is part of the Royal Oak County Park. So when we purchased the old golf course, we developed a portion of it. They used the funds to build the park, the county park, and we just incorporated our storm pond into that because we actually built it for them. So it's a little different, but our other communities in Royal Oak, sometimes we do underground detention, which is very expensive and a lot of maintenance. This is typical for the type of similar type of communities we've done with regard to the ponds.
Okay,
Well, can you
thanks.
convert ours to a splash pad too?
If it was bigger, yes, we would.
Any further questions for the applicant?
No, you're gonna have sidewalks throughout, right? On the side, the new streets as well?
Yes.
Do you wanna talk about, are you planning on doing certain lighting? I know a lot of people, in the neighborhood, we don't have an overabundance of bright lights, and I think a lot of people like that. Do you have any idea of what you guys plan to do there?
So that is a really good question. And I know we've gone back and forth on lighting. I don't see anything that we're proposing as far as lighting unless I've missed it, and I apologize. But we typically, that is kind of our MO, is not to add lighting unless it's a minimum requirement. We do them at the intersection. So I'm looking at the plans, and I don't see that as part of it unless I'm missing something. But generally speaking, in a lot of our communities, we do require them to keep the front light on, which creates that lighting that's necessary for the neighborhood. So yeah, I do not believe, from what I'm seeing, we propose any lighting within this community.
Okay, thank you.
And if I find it, I will tell you that I was wrong.
So
but I
not
don't
too
see
many
it.
streetlights then anyway, right? If you can't find them.
Correct.
Okay,
And it would only be at the intersections if there was.
okay.
Okay, thank you. If no one up here has any questions for the applicant, does the public have any questions? Can I see anybody wants to?
You want to open it for public?
I'll open it for public then.
Is it public discussion or public comment?
We can discuss.
Okay.
I couldn't hear everything that was going on, but what did they say about the retention pond? Is it going to have a fence around it or not?
Yes.
It is going to have a fence around it. Is it going to be a covered, somebody was talking about covering it with grass or something, or weeds, or
No,
you're going to maintain that?
It's not going to look like a lawn area. It's going to have seeding in there with seeds growing up, and it's not going to be manicured and mowed like a lawn, and it's going to be dry most of the time. It's only going to be wet when the heavy rains come.
Okay. Okay, now I don't have a copy of the site plan. They got this detached garages. How do you get to the garage? You got an alley?
Driveway.
Driveway.
Huh?
There's a driveway in the plans to the garage.
From
Past the house, just like a traditional home.
Okay,
that
so
you
you
see.
drive in front and go back to the driveway.
Yep, from the street, the driveway to the garage.
And the other question is the height of the structures. Are some of them going to be 2-story and some of them 2.5-story because of some pitch they want to put on the roofs of the house?
Well, I do believe they will have to follow our ordinance. I believe we're at, Joe, is it 25 feet for residential homes? Yeah, 25 feet is the height that we have in our R2 ordinance, so they will have to, we don't have that in our plans, but they'll have to abide by that ordinance.
Okay. Because the reason I was concerned about the fence around the retention pond is that area has got a lot of kids in the area. I mean, you got preschoolers over there playing at the park. You got skateboarders. You got football games going on. People coming in, and I'm glad to hear they're going to put a fence up because I could just see some kids in there swimming after a rainstorm.
4 foot fence.
4 foot. I know.
Yeah.
They can get over that.
Oh,
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in public?
Ron Brisson, 809 Elmsford. To the building height question, on page 27, there's a table that says they're going to do it at the building permit level. So I read into that and assumed they still want to leave it open to go to the 27 feet. They're not signing up. All the other ones I saw, they're committing to the lot size, the lot width, and so forth. So I did have some concerns over the building height.
on lot 27?
Page 27 in your document, there's a small table where they highlight all of the ordinances, but their answer to the building height ordinance was, we're going to do it at building permit level.
Right, they're going to be held to the city regulations on that, the permits.
Oh, it's reviewed at the time of building permit, so they will not be able to, they'll have to show that it will be that height. Sorry, if I'm not saying it right, Joe, or Nick, correct me. But if they have to show that it's meets our standards in order to get a permit from the building department.
Yeah, that's correct. So they will be held to that 25-foot height, but we're not looking at the design of the house, each individual house right now. So we can't definitively say how tall each one of them is. One might be 23 feet, one might be 25. but they will be a maximum of 25 feet.
In the retaining wall question, since I've lived there, when it does rain, my backyard does flood. And so I am concerned that, why did the engineer initially put retaining wall up there? And if the grade happens to flood my backyard once they start building, am I going after the HOA? So, that whole-
I believe it's going to be graded so that no water is going to be running off of their property onto yours. Is that a safe statement to say? Yeah, we keep an eye on that. And they will not add any additional water to your property.
Okay, and then also on page 46 in your documentation, I have a electrical pole in my backyard, and it looks like they highlighted all the other electrical poles in the diagram on that page, but left mine out, which I'm glad if they're not going to tap into it. But I was curious about that.
That I don't know if they can even answer at this stage.
But those were the things I noticed in the
If
document.
you know anything
So
about the
thank you.
poll, could you answer that for him?
Yeah, we're not touching any of the poles whatsoever. So those all would stay where they're at. And then question on the grading. Yeah, so essentially, well, this doesn't go up. So essentially, we cannot put any water on any neighboring properties. In fact, we're actually taking some of those neighboring properties, water that's already going onto the property. We're lower. It kind of goes all toward the southeast, if you will. So we'll be taking some of that water. By no means can we put water on their property, and we will have storm manholes in the backs of our homes just so it could catch all that water so it does not go on their property. So we're forced to because of the engineers, but we wouldn't anyway. We're not going to put water on other people's property.
Thank you. Anyone else in public? Seeing none.
She's got one more.
One more?
Hi, I'm Sue Schlenker. I live at 929 North Selfridge. I think the new street's gonna come right into my front yard. So maybe could you guys put a big boulder in my front yard? Just because I know that one house gets run into a lot in Clausen. So I don't want anybody running into my house. I don't know, maybe.
Thank you. Anyone else in public? At this point, I will close public discussion, and I will entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the preliminary site condominium application for the Shalom School site, parcel ID 1620-33-179-043.
Support.
Motion support. Anybody want to add or subtract anything? We're all good with it? May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. You're getting closer to welcome to Clausen.
Thank you. We'll see you soon on the final.
We'll see you again. Thank you. And we'll move on to number 9, which is the draft master plan update. Request authorization to forward to council to authorize distribution.
Yes, thank you. So we've reached that point where the master plan has been drafted. We've had our open house, and we actually got between 20 and 30 people who came in and looked at everything. And the next step in the process is to request that City Council make the draft available for distribution for comment, and that goes directly to all of the agencies and neighboring communities and other entities that received the notice of intent to plan when we first started the process. It also goes, of course, on the website and is available for public comment as well. There's not really much more to it than that. We do have, I believe Nick put it in the packet, the city manager did ask us to bring up one topic. Nick, you just want me to? Yeah. Okay. So the city manager asked us to discuss with you whether you were comfortable adding an item to one of the implementation tables that would allow the planning commission to consider in the future permitting ground level parking with the same number of inhabited stories that we permit now. So if you've got a district where there's 2 stories, you could move the 2 stories up and put the parking underneath. That's what he wanted us to ask you about. I worded it in a message to Nick, which I believe he put in the packet. And I was trying to give you some room to breathe if you do discuss it as an implementation item after adoption of the plan. But that was the one thing that the city manager wanted us to ask about before we moved forward with requesting
Would that be like considering putting parking on the ground floor and raising the building up?
You'd be putting the building above the parking,
and still keep our same 3-story height limitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, would parking be considered a story?
Yeah.
Well, right. I was not specific about that in the language that I gave you because I didn't want to lock you into anything. But I mean, it's good to be general in your master plan anyway, right? You're going to discuss it in the future. But that is the idea is that if you're saving land by putting the parking under the building, you get to
If they put it under the building, if they put it underground, I'd be happy with it. But if they put it as the first floor, I'm against it. And if they put it as rooftop parking, I'd be against it.
Sure.
I don't want to raise the height of the building.
I can pretty much guarantee no one's going to put it underground because it's due to how expensive it is.
Royal Oak's
But
done that. They've got a few underground parkings. I know it's expensive, but
yeah.
Well, and I just don't feel like we've had enough time to actually speak as a planning commission and go through that. We've spent extensive time on our corridors, and I just don't think we'd be doing right by our work and duty as planning commission to just sign on to. I'm happy with maybe delaying pushing this to council if you want us to further consider it and have it as a discussion item. I personally am not comfortable placing that into it without further exploration.
Yeah, where along the lines within this implementation table are we talking about? Because right now, I mean, it's just a blanket sentence of, is he asking us to consider to use or, consider this in all zones?
So, and again, that's why it's general. It was a conversation that we had because it's been clear that we want to maintain the existing parking standards that we have. And so by having language along this lines very generally will give us more of an opportunity to explore how we can have quality development and still maintain the same parking standards. And so in the downtown right now anyway, we've got the commercial liner use, which would still kind of play into effect so you wouldn't have parking right up to the lot line. And so, well, yes, this language is relatively vague. It was done intentionally as just part of the master plan is something that we can look at implementing in the future and just use as a baseline to look at developing future ordinance language.
I have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what I'm concerned about is someone picking on this and using it as leverage, right? That's what I don't want. I mean, I'm happy to have the discussion about the possibilities in certain circumstances to allow it potentially. However, I don't want the inclusion of this language to somehow be used as leverage at us.
That was my follow-up comment, is that we've had so many times developers come back with, but it's in your master plan. So then all of a sudden, we're beholden to some type of, so especially without having further discussion, it can be something that we look to in the future if you don't want to delay this, to potentially put some type of ordinance together and look at specific areas where we might think it's fitting with a certain You know, like if we're saying 20% or whatever, keeping in mind of the commercial liner, and find that mix. But I feel like it involves a lot more discussion with us all.
Tell Mr. Riker we'll be happy to put it in next year's master plan.
Update.
Well, every 5 years, so we'll be hitting
Okay.
this probably before 2030.
Yeah, I think it's a little too late to add to this one.
What's the minimum height of the I think there's a stipulation of the minimum height.
15 feet.
15 foot.
Yes.
So.
In the city center.
In the city
In the city
center, so
center,
just think of the city center.
For the first floor, and then
Right.
subsequent floors can be whatever, right?
10, I think.
Yeah, well, they can be, it's governed by building
Minimum,
code, building
yeah.
code,
And you
yeah.
have a
By
ma-
use, right, Joe?
It's a
Or-
minimum 10
Oh, okay.
feet, I believe.
You
And
have a
then
max-
they can obviously
There's a
go
maximum-
higher, but then it's
right.
capped at how,
There's
what the
maximum
building
height
height
you can-
is.
You can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could explore options where we change the minimum height of the first floor to accommodate parking and still maintain the maximum building height, which would allow possibly four floors, including the parking, but still maintain the total structure height.
Yeah.
And I think we're all open to kind of having further discussions about it, but not committing to it being in our master plan just yet.
Again, my concern is the leverage, Nick. You know, I mean, I feel like it's going to provide leverage to a developer to come at us and say exactly what was said earlier, that, you know, we're going to, it's in your master plan, so so you need to consider it, you know, and I don't know. I just don't think we've talked about it enough to even make it a consideration and a discussion from a developer that might bring it to us.
Okay, that's fine. We just wanted to present this as a one final swing of the bat, I guess we'll call it, now that football season's over. And again, just because it's not in the master plan, it doesn't mean we can't pursue it in the future. And just because it's in the master plan doesn't mean we have to implement it, right? And that's the key thing to remember with the master plan.
Nick, I'm just kind of curious, where did this thought come from? Did it come from public comment or just general dialogue?
Conversation with admin and Joe, and just, you know, we've spoken about a lot is maintaining the parking count. How can we be creative to maintain that parking count and allow people to come with plans that meet our parking requirement, but also allow some flexibility on their building envelope?
So thinking outside the box a little bit, right?
That was our intention. If that's not what the PC wants to do, that's totally fine. And
I think the PC is a great place to bring that intention and further discussion, though, because
And then that's what we're
having
doing.
that discussion with Joe, and no offense to, I mean, absolutely no offense to Joe, he's the right guy to talk to, but also engaging us in that conversation, I think would be great.
Right,
I think so.
That's why
I
we're
know.
here.
Well, but I'm not in a master plan context, though,
You
like
haven't-
in the
You haven't
future.
spoken to my concern that I said about a developer coming in, now that we put this language in the master plan, and having leverage against us to accept their proposal to do.
Well, I think when Ms. Redmond first brought it up, she kind of played that because when they have come referencing the master plan, those have been denied too. And so you have the ability to deny any type of request just
Nick,
because it's
we
in the
have not
master
denied a
plan.
PUD.
I didn't even mention PUD.
But that's when they leverage it for our master plan.
I think the master plan talked about rezoning components, parking reductions. I know there's been applicants that have spoken about that, and the PC hasn't entertained it, which is fine.
Okay, but the only thing that gives them flexibility and holds us to adherence of a master plan and what we have in our master plan is a PUD. And that's when I feel like it will be used as leverage, is when the PUD looks at, okay, we're gonna go outside the scope of your ordinance and let's see how it aligns with your master plan. So I feel like in order to create that protection, I'm not comfortable putting it in our master plan at this time. Is that kind of where you were going with that?
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'd like more time to talk it through, maybe put an ordinance in place, you know, that describes exactly what we will allow. That I'm really interested in having a discussion about.
Sure, yeah.
I think we can still maintain that conversation.
I think we can definitely have that conversation and without making any changes here.
Perfect.
On the thing that we've been working on for.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think
Time now.
Joe and I do not want to leave
a
this
long
room
time.
without getting a thumbs up. Obviously, we will if that's the case, but I think that's the end goal here regardless.
So back to the original question, are we ready to make a motion to proceed?
It's up to the six of you.
I have a question for Joe first. Were you going to ask a question first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Joe, I thought we talked about this, so forgive me if we did, but in the language of the parking study, I wanted to make sure that we, in the light of our characteristic of Clausen, I know I've said this many times, we don't have overnight on-street parking, and residents were at, I forget, over 70% in favor of that in the results of their survey. I was wondering if, when we're looking at different ways to look at parking study, that we will, is there any way we can incorporate like language in that portion of it to make sure that we're considering those aspects and how it can affect, the characteristic of our neighborhoods and displacement of resident?
Yeah, I believe it's already addressed.
I didn't see it in that. I didn't see it in the parking study portion.
Well, I would have to go back through it, and it's been a little while since I've read it. But let's see.
Okay, maybe you did. I'm sorry, Joe, I might be wrong. On 83, it says in master plan survey residents asked whether they support it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, we've
Okay.
got that right. I mean, we're definitely not looking at changing that, and I'm trying. Yeah,
I appreciate.
Yeah.
I just for some reason overlooked that. Thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, so then where we stand tonight is we're going to approve this to send it up to council, and then it's going to come back to us for public hearing.
That's correct. Yes. So it will go to council. Council will authorize distribution of the plan, at which point it will be distributed. And once it's distributed, so like let's say it takes us 3 days to get it out. From that point on, there is a 63-day period in which everyone has to comment on it. And then after that 63-day period elapses, the next agenda that's available, it will be put on there for a public hearing.
Okay.
I did see, and I know you guys kind of gave us feedback on the open house, our last meeting, and I did see comments about, excuse me, the 14-mile diet and people's concerns on that. I just want to make it known that I'm not as concerned about that being something that we will be used leverage-wise, because it's just a different type of, thing that we're calling out in our master plan, the exploration, and look into that. So I just want to make sure, because I know that there's a lot of questions and concerns about that, and it's something that will happen open in public, and that decision is not being made here. So kind of want to just put that out there.
Sure,
But,
yeah.
I'll make a motion to move the draft of the master plan update to be forwarded to city council for distribution to neighboring communities and interested agencies. And that a public hearing be set for the next available planning commission meeting after the statutory review period elapses.
Second.
Motion and support. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And number 10, do we have a planner's report?
I'm pleased to report that your master plan has been sent to the city council for distribution, and we will be having a public hearing soon.
Thank you. Number 11, do we have staff report and training opportunities?
Just a few things I wanted to share with you. So in the PC, or in the staff report, there was a letter from the city of Royal Oak, which is kind of right in line with our master plan. I included the link to their page if anyone wanted to take a look at their master plan. So that's part of the requirement that we'll be doing, sharing with Royal Oak and the other neighboring cities that we have. Again, we did not have the appointment of officers on this agenda just due to one vacancy and one term that has not been extended. I'm thinking we'll probably want to look at doing this in the next meeting or two, depending on what the city council does with appointments, just so we can kind of maintain business as usual. Again, there were a few training opportunities that were handed out. I believe it was last meeting before in the handout. I haven't heard from anyone if there's interest in partaking in those, but if you are, please send me an email or give me a call, and I can more than happy to get those scheduled for you. There have not been any major changes in the development landscape right now, but I think as we get closer to spring, there will be some plans coming in that we'll have need for your eyes. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right. Nothing?
I got to say just a little bit, just so we're aware of the election of officers. On page 2, section 2, we're saying as a shall statement that we're supposed to do it the first meeting of the year. In the last 3 years, we've delayed it only one time, and that's because we had 2 absent. We're talking about quorum discussion. That was on 2023. So I hope we don't delay too much longer, because in all these times, we've never talked about reappointment or vacant seats.
Yeah, I actually really agree with that. I do think that it's something that you're talking about our bylaws, that it's something that is upon us as a commission to do, and not necessarily something that we rely on admin to provoke us with. So I do think that it's important to absolutely have that happen at the next meeting.
My belief and hope is that at the next council meeting, they will approve new nominees.
Yeah, but I mean, a new nominee walking in here is not going to really feel confident in knowing who anyone is anyway, so I don't know how that would contribute or prohibit us as a body, figuring that out.
I just want to spark that dialogue, right?
Yeah.
So we just don't keep kicking the can down the road.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, again, I just want to remind everyone that there were 4 vacancies, or 4 expired terms and 1 vacancy when January started, which is why we didn't want to do it, just in case there was a change of heart to have 5 different people come up and serve on the body. Was it likely? No, but it was a possibility. So instead of doing the election of officers at that point, it was determined to hold tight for a little bit.
So do you feel confident that it'll be on the next schedule?
I don't want to say 100% yes, but I think it's more than likely.
How about I say if they don't have nominees appointed for us at our next planning commission, we'll do it.
Does that have to happen by vote? Do we need to?
I think it's something we can have on the next agenda.
I thought about adding it even the agenda tonight, but yeah, so.
Yeah, okay.
The more we continue, that's just another practice established against our bylaws, right? So we should try-
I agree, I support it,
So
yeah.
if it's not on our next agenda, I'll put it on that.
Okay.
We'll do it at that point. Okay, I'm good. Anybody else? Questions? We have no legal update tonight. And does anybody have any comments before we adjourn?
No.
Nothing? Well, it gets quiet.
Okay. It's a weird night. I'll make a motion.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
Motion support. Can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Carpenter? Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Timlin?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Maybe we have to have a little card of who's going to take that. Visual cue. And I anticipated this one was going to be a longer one.